30 years ago, the world underwent one of those seismic changes that mark the end of an era. The Cold War, which brought mankind to the brink of extinction on more than one occasion, suddenly ended. Communism, that had started as a dream of liberation, collapsed after 70 years of tyranny, leaving tens of millions dead in its wake. The map of Europe changed beyond recognition. The two Germanys became one, Czechoslovakia became two, and the mighty Soviet Union dissolved into 15 independent countries. To many of its participants and observers, this radical change augured nothing less than the final victory of liberal democracy as the preferred mode of social organization. One political thinker, Francis Fukuyama, wrote an influential essay on the end of history, till then a sobering tale of human conflict and competing ideologies. But if he really believed history had ended, he couldn't have been more wrong. Not only it did not end, it came back with a vengeance. Within a couple of years, nationalist passions, stirred by opportunistic politicians, ravaged former Yugoslavia, leaving behind tens of thousands of dead and hundreds of thousands of homeless. Within a little more than a decade, Al-Qaeda terrorists struck at the heart of New York's financial district and brought down the two tallest towers in the United States, killing almost 3,000 people. And within 2 decades, the so-called Islamic State unleashed a campaign of terror throughout the Middle East and Europe with the aim to bring down the secular world order, and became co-responsible for the largest refugee wave in recent history. And within 30 years, large swathes of Europe and North America found themselves in the grip of insecurity and uncertainty, opening way to populism, nationalism, and to the questioning of the liberal order itself. Fukuyama's piece thus became a monument to the folly of hubris that has been taking hold of victors after a battle since times immemorial. Today, the world is not nearly as optimistic as it was 30 years ago. It seems to suffer from a crisis of leadership, a crisis of vision, and a crisis of responsibility. For the first time in a century, it cannot be taken for granted that the next generation of Europeans and Americans will be better off than its predecessors. The United States is no longer the uncontested, indispensable nation and has to compete with other centers of power hostile to liberal democracy. The information age has brought about enormous benefits and efficiencies to our everyday lives, but it has also done away with the established ways of arriving at facts, knowledge, and truth itself, ushering in a world where, as a friend of mine put it in a book, nothing is true and everything is possible. And the brave new world of artificial intelligence may soon make us redundant. The result of all this is palpable anxiety permeating millions of lives. Now, there are 2 ways of trying to cope with this kind of existential anxiety. One is to persist in our certainties and blame our problems on external factors such as demons, rebel rousers, parents, teachers, foreign influences who are trying to lead us astray from the path of righteousness. The other is to take a deep breath of self-reflection, acknowledge our failures, and approach the future with a sense of humility. To restore the sense of fairness and justice in our societies, we may have to recognize that too many of our problems came about as a result of our own selfishness, greed, and corruption. To redress the balance in nature, we may have to rely less on huge and ultimately impractical schemes to curb the effects of our overindulgence, and more on curbing the overindulgence itself. And to rediscover the wisdom that stems from knowledge, we may have to realize that truth is meaningless unless we are willing to vouch for it with our identities and to bear witness to it in exercising our responsibilities. And to prevent becoming redundant because of artificial intelligence, we must find new, meaningful ways to lead our lives and benefit the lives of others in the process. None of this is going to happen without us. Politics is too important to be left to politicians. In the darkest times of communist oppression, the Czech dissident playwright and essayist Václav Havel came with the idea of the power of the powerless. It was based on the realization that the evil in this world cannot prevail without a degree of consent and complicity of ordinary citizens, of all of us. When, on the other hand, the citizens refuse to comply, even the most corrupt and criminal government cannot have its way. As the students who marched through the streets of Prague 30 years ago to protest the abuses of the communists learned, the power of the powerless, the exercise of the power of the powerless comes with its own risks and requires a great deal of courage. Such courage can only stem from a feeling of shared responsibility for the world around us and from a sense of humility about our own place in it. In the words of Václav Havel, the only genuine core of all our actions, if they are to be moral, is responsibility. Responsibility to something higher than my family, my country, my firm, my success. If we don't find that responsibility in ourselves, the end of history may come in ways no one predicted or wished for, just like that.